2018. It's now 7 o'clock p.m. If everyone would please rise and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. This evening, we're being joined by Pastor Edwin Brinklow. He is going to be providing us with the invocation this evening. Edwin?
Will you pray with me, please? Holy and loving God, thank you so much for your elected leaders of this city commission. We ask your blessing upon their meeting this evening. May through the power of your Holy Spirit dwell among their hearts and minds. And may the discussions that take place and the decisions that are made all be for your glory. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you for joining us this evening. All right, and with that, we'll move on to roll call.
Commissioner Cole?
Here.
Commissioner Moore?
Here.
Commissioner Cherney?
Here.
Commissioner Viancy?
Yes.
Mayor Hess?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion that we go into a public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. This public hearing, the purpose of this hearing is to hear comments on an ordinance to amend the City of Buchanan's medical marijuana facility ordinance 2017.07/404. And this evening, we'll be having a second reading of the ordinance.
Mayor and Commissioners, this is the second reading of the ordinance, so sit back and hopefully we will get through this quickly. This is ordinance number 2018.10-409, City of Buchanan, Berrien County, Michigan. An ordinance to amend ordinance 2017.07/404, medical marijuana facilities, for clarity and to add stacking language. The City of Buchanan ordains. Section 1. Section 2. Definitions is amended by adding the following definition. R. True party of interest means 1. For an individual or sole proprietor and spouse. 2. For a partnership and limited liability partnership. All partners and their spouses. For a limited partnership and limited liability partnership, all general and limited partners and their spouses. For a limited liability company, all members, managers, and their spouses. 3, for privately held corporation, all corporate officers or persons with equivalent titles and their spouses. 4, for a publicly held corporation, all corporate officers or persons with equivalent titles and their spouses. 5, for a multi-level ownership enterprise, any entity or person that receives or has the right to receive a percentage of the gross or net profit from the enterprise during any full or partial calendar or fiscal year. 6, for a nonprofit corporation, all individuals and entities with membership or shareholder rights in accordance with the Articles of Incorporation or the bylaws and their spouses. 7, for a trust, the names of the beneficiaries. However, true party of interest does not mean A, a person or entity receiving reasonable payment for rent on a fixed basis under a bona fide lease or rental obligation, unless the lessor or property manager exercises control over or participates in the management of the business. B, a person who receives a bonus as an employee if the employee is on a fixed wage or salary and the bonus is not more than 25% of the employee's pre-bonus annual compensation, or if the bonus is based on a written incentive or bonus program that is not out of the ordinary for the services rendered. Section 2. Section 4, requirements and procedure for issuing permits, is amended by deleting A in its entirety and replacing with the following. A, no person shall operate a medical marijuana facility in the City of Buchanan without a valid medical marijuana facility permit issued by the City of Buchanan pursuant to the provisions of this ordinance. Application for each medical marijuana facility permit required by this ordinance shall be made in writing to the city clerk and must be approved by the City Commission in the state of Michigan prior to commencing operation. B is deleted in its entirety and replaced with the following language. B, an application for a medical marijuana facility permit required by this ordinance shall contain the following information. This information is required for the applicant, the manager of the medical marijuana facility, and all persons who are true parties of interest in the medical marijuana facility for which a medical marijuana facility permit is being sought. B is further amended by adding the following new language after number 24. Number 25, a completed application for a special use permit from the City of Buchanan Planning Commission with all required documents and fees. B is further amended by changing the original 25 to 26. C is amended by deleting it in its entirety and replacing with the following. Upon receipt of a completed medical marijuana facility permit application, meeting the requirements of this ordinance, and confirmation that the number of existing permits does not exceed the maximum number established by this ordinance, the city clerk shall refer a copy of the application to each of the following for their review and approval: the police department or their designee, the fire department or their designee, the building department, the zoning administrator, and the city treasurer or their designee. Once applications are verified by each department to be sufficiently complete and comprehensive, the city clerk shall forward the applications to the City Commission. D is amended by deleting it in its entirety and replacing it with, the city attorney or their designee has addressed any request for an opinion from the city staff during its review process. E is deleted in its entirety, and F now becomes E. Section 3. A new Section 5 is created and inserted after Section 4 as follows. Section 5. Medical marijuana permit stacking for Class C growers. A medical marijuana Class C grower who has received a medical marijuana facility permit from the City of Buchanan may apply for and be granted multiple stacked Class C grow permits, each authorizing the grower to grow up to 1,500 additional marijuana plants at their existing location based on their capability and capacity to accommodate multiple medical marijuana facility permits, subject to the following conditions. A permittee who applies for a stacked Class C grow permit will be subject to an additional application, an application fee of $1,500 for each stacked Class C grow permit. Approved stacked Class C grow permits shall be considered an enhancement to the original Class C medical marijuana facility permit granted by the City of Buchanan. B, stacked Class C grow permits shall only be issued to the same medical marijuana facility permittee that previously received approval for its original Class C grow permit. C, applications to stack Class C grow permits shall contain all documentation required by the City of Buchanan to show that the permittee has the capability and capacity to accommodate stacked permits. D, if approved, permittee shall submit expansion plans to the building inspector, zoning administrator, fire chief, and public services director. E, the permittee must comply with all City of Buchanan ordinances and zoning requirements. F, the permittee must comply with all state of Michigan rules and regulations applicable to medical marijuana stacking for Class C grow medical marijuana facility permits. Section 4. Section 5, permit renewal, becomes Section 6, and is further amended to add the following language after the word law to A. Upon the expiration of an existing permit, the permit will be renewed by the City of Buchanan for 1 year. If 1, there are no uncured administrative and/or legal violations in the prior year, including complaint log reviews and verification that taxes are paid. 2, the applicant has paid the annual permit fee for the renewal period. 3, any stakeholder changes have been fully disclosed to the City of Buchanan. And 4, the applicant has applied for a state medical marijuana facility license. Section 5. Section 6, permit application evaluation, becomes Section 7 and is amended to read as follows. A, is deleted in its entirety and replaced with the following. The City Commission shall assess all applications. C is amended by changing the word council to commission in the first line. Section 6, the following sections are amended as follows. Section 7, permits generally becomes Section 8, Section 8 becomes Section 9. Section 9 becomes Section 10. Section 10 becomes Section 11. Section 11 becomes Section 12. Section 12 becomes Section 13. Section 13 becomes Section 14. Section 14 becomes Section 15. Section 15 becomes Section 16. Section 16 becomes Section 17. Section 17 becomes Section 18. Section 18 becomes Section 19. Section 19 becomes Section 20. And Section 20 becomes Section 21. That's all I have.
Any questions from the commission?
No.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
and now it's time for public comment. Citizens are allowed 3 minutes to discuss the ordinance reading that you just heard.
Norma Ferris, 304 North Oak. Since this is a brand-new subject of occupation in Buchanan, is this the only time that I'm going to hear communication? Or will I be able to have yearly communication from you regarding this?
This is a yearly thing where we go in and we look at it. We're gonna make
You're
any
not
adjustments.
discussing with me.
Okay,
As a resident, this is new to all of us. Would you talk to us?
Yeah, every applicant that's come had to come before us, and you were
I'm
here
not
for some of
talking
those.
tonight, I'm talking 10 years from now. Am I going
Right.
to hear
Yes,
something?
they need to apply every year to get their license renewed.
So we will have a
Yes.
public hearing every year?
Yes, yes, for each
Okay.
one. Okay, anyone else this evening?
I just wanted to come up on behalf of myself and Redbud Roots and thank all of you guys for the past 2 years. You guys have done an outstanding job with this ordinance. What you guys are doing for Buchanan is outstanding on top of the marijuana stuff, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Anyone else this evening? All right, with that, I'm going to make a motion to close the public hearing and go back into our regular meeting. All in favor? Aye. All right, and with that, we're on item number 5, public comments. Citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to discuss any agenda item. Yeah, it's okay.
Norma Ferris, 304 North Oak. What is wrong with Enterprise that you have a resolution on here? Clarify the division. You go either one way or the other. What are you talking about?
Okay, right, we will go over that when we get to that item. We'll be talking about it
Promise?
fully, yes. All right. Anyone else? Any agenda item? All right, and with that, we'll close public comments. Moving on to consent calendar, and Clerk Dina, did you want to refresh my memory what we said about this? We're just going to have roll call to approve the consent calendar?
Correct.
I don't need to make a motion or anything.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I just put a note that it would be a roll call rather than a all in favor.
Oh, gotcha, you're, okay, all right. Thanks for keeping me on track.
We approve the consent calendar.
Okay, I need a second.
I'll second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cole? Yes. Commissioner Viancy?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Turney?
Yes.
Mayor Hess?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. And with that, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I will second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on to number 8, invoices and expenditures. Approve payables for October 8th, 2018 in the amount of $184,159.98 and payroll for the month of September in the amount of $152,112.75. I need a motion.
Also move.
Okay.
Support.
All right, roll call, please. Oh, hang on a minute, Commissioner Viganski, what can we
I
do
just
for
want
you?
to say thank you very much for moving this off the consent calendar, whoever did this. I'd like to ask for the forgiveness of the DDA check, but we've already been through this, but I did want to make mention. I did want to ask about the checks for mileage reimbursement. Do we still have that police vehicle that was sitting out here in the parking lot? I seen it wasn't out there. The white one?
The white one, yes. Yeah, we still have that.
So, do we use it?
Yes, we use it, building department buys, or uses it during his inspections during the week. Again, he's a part-time employee, he uses it on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and half-day on Friday to go and make his inspections. It's also available for, staff pickups,
Well, that was
meetings.
my biggest question, Bill, is, there's a really small check in here. I mean, I understand there's a big check to Mandy, so she went on a trip
Yeah.
somewhere. But Deborah had a really small one, and I was just wondering if that vehicle's available for something like that.
Yes, it is. Again, the vehicle is pretty well worn out. Trusting it to go any great distance is, I'd hate to have somebody go any great distance in that vehicle. It works well for the building department to go from A to B within the city. But outside of that, it's pretty ragged, but it is still some wheels for us to use.
Okay,
Thank you, Your Honor.
anything else?
Not me.
Okay, great. I need a roll call, please.
Commissioner Turney,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Viancy,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Hess.
Yes,
Motion carries.
and with that, we'll move on to the next item, item 9, reports by departments, committee, and boards, and this evening we have none. So we'll move on to item number 10, unfinished business. Adopt ordinance 2018-10/409, an ordinance to amend the medical marijuana facilities ordinance 2017.07/404.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll
Second it.
support.
okay. All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Turney,
Yes.
Commissioner Viancy,
Yes.
Mayor Hess.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next item, item 11, new business. A, approve Pearson Construction quote for pre-development of the DPW building in the amount of $10,500, and I believe we'll be hearing from Bill.
Mayor and Commissioners, in the past, we've had discussions about the need for a new DPW building. We've had a few work sessions where many ideas have been proposed, and it's clear we need some help and direction to help focus those. And we received some information about pre-development construction service, and that was presented to us by Pearson Construction. I've asked Pearsons to look at the original quote, which was for $12,000, and see if they could better that quote a little bit, and they did. They came back with a 10.5 quote, reduce their costs a little bit. But this is something we desperately need to get this project rolling and get our thoughts put to paper and to move forward. So I'm requesting that you consider approving the quote from Pearson Construction for $10,500 to help us with pre-construction development work. So again, under the quote, Pearson, if we select them as a contractor, we'll get that $10,500 back against the cost and quotes of their work. But they'll help us get to the point where we will be able to find an engineer and/or come up with some RFPs to move forward with that building. This is what I believe we need to get to that point to put the plan in action.
Okay, questions? Yep.
Is there, what is the plan? I mean, will there be work sessions that they will be attending with us?
Yes.
Or
That,
how
that,
is that going to
we'll have some more work sessions where they'll be the moderator of the work sessions and extract the commentary and the desires of the commission, and put some numbers to the ideas. They'll be able to, instruct us a little bit better on, yes, that's a good idea, but it's going to cost about here, so where do we rein it in? Is our building too big, or is our building too small? They'll have do some surveys on what our needs are, how much equipment we have, to get us better defined into what is it we actually need. We know what we want, but what do we need? And to try to make that clearer for us.
Commissioner Attorney has a question as well.
Bill, how soon, if we approve this tonight, how soon will we start getting our plans together? Winter's coming, the DPW building is basically falling apart. So is there a time frame where we can get this?
I
set
can't
up?
answer that. I'd have to talk with Pearsons to see when they'll be able to start the process for us. I'm sure it's going to all be based on the fact of how quickly we can come to that final plan, what we want to move forward with. I'd really like to be able to start in the spring with the building. So we'll have the winter time to refine our thoughts and get our understanding of what the costs are and have those financial conversations on how to pay for it.
And I have a request. We're going to be making these decisions, but we don't really know how much equipment. Is there, do we have like a binder or notebook or like some kind of an inventory so that we can kind of start preparing?
Yep.
Is there a
get
way
that
we
together,
can
yeah.
look at that? I mean, I don't think we all need individual copies, but if we could at least have that at our disposal, that might help as we move forward. And I think Dale had one more question too.
Well, if it's going to be in the spring, so that'll also intake our new budget year. So we could probably try to work something with the budget session too, I would
Yes.
imagine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Viganski?
Have we talked to them at all about developing that out there so that we could get kind of a leg up, or?
That can also be part of this discussion. Again, they're pretty well-known construction company developers in this area, so that'll be some good insight from them on the possibilities for that site. And again, we have heard that, do we want to put our DPW building there and use some of that property that could be developed in a larger manner? That was a question that was out there and posed by our energy evaluator. So that's something that'll be in the mix in this conversation. So I don't know if that was what you were looking.
Yeah, well, I just want to make a comment too. Pearsons is in Michigan already, and whether the general public understands it or not, Michigan is very regulated. With as much work as there is going on in Indiana right now, it's very difficult to get contractors from Indiana, South Bend, Mishawaka up here. Everybody's working. And Indiana's a headache, but not near as big a headache as Michigan. Sorry to say that, we live in Michigan, but that's the facts. So I'm really happy that we're moving forward with this, Bill, I really am.
I did have a conversation with Majority Builders. They actually recommended pre-construction service for us, but they declined to get involved in that. They would like to eventually bid on the project, but they said, develop what you need and come back to us, and maybe we'll have the time to look at it. But they, as you said, they're quite a busy company.
Acorn's just as busy, and they're about just as big.
Yep.
And also, if citizens have input about what they would like to see be done with the remainder of the property that wouldn't be taken up by the DPW, will we be having meetings for public input too, or should they submit public
No, we-
input some other way?
We can schedule that
Okay.
along with the work sessions, and if the conversation will be relatively open, so.
Right.
We'll hear commentary, we'll seek out commentary
Okay.
regarding that
Excellent.
parcel. Actually, it's a beautiful parcel.
It is.
There's a lot of brush and scrub brush on it, but when you look for 9 acres of property to develop, that's got it. It's got a flat surface, it's got infrastructure at its boundaries, it has the capability of a high voltage power source, which is highly beneficial to manufacturers, and the fact they're going to pay high voltage rates rather than the normal tariff rates for if they weren't near the voltage
Right.
capabilities. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's some good questions that we'll have to look at and answer. But the issue is, we have to get a building somewhere for the DPW. And, because putting money in the present building is not reasonable. So,
And I would like to make the suggestion to the commission that we start making a list of questions and things that we're thinking about in regards to this new DPW building, so that when we get together, we can kind of, keep on track and make sure we're asking the things that we want to ask, just to have that in our back pocket. So I'm going to need a motion if there are no more questions.
Make that motion.
Okay,
I will second.
all right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Viancy,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Attorney,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Hess.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item B, under new business, approve contribution to the Southwestern Michigan Economic Growth Alliance in the amount of $8,900.
Mayor, Commissioners, in my briefing, I went into length about the issue with the contribution. Not really an issue, but it is an investment into the SMEGA, which is our regional economic development service that we've been part of for years and years and years. They've been challenged with some of their contributors, being the larger contributors are saying, we really would like to see you join forces with the Four Flags Area Chamber to help stabilize some of the funding that SMEGA needs, and to provide some support and direction that the chamber needs over there. So there is a positive on both sides coming together. We've been asked to, they've looked at the funding sources, and they've came up with the fact that they wanted to do it by population. So in doing that, our contribution went up by $1,900 over what we were paying, and to continue this support of SMEGA. SMEGA is kind of like our Cornerstone Alliance, or the St. Joe Benton Harbor Cornerstone Alliance. So very active group. Again, we only have 1.5 employees. If you get a site seeker in a business coming to this area, wants to look at this area, their normal first call would be to SMEGA. SMEGA would sit down with them. They'd have the inventory of buildings that would be available that might suit them, areas, vacant property, information on infrastructure, resources. They provide all that and work with that company looking for a spot to build a new company, and/or working with present companies to, if they want to expand, and to help support that. We are, to understand SMEGA, you have to understand that we are part of a regional effort to keep increasing manufacturing in this area. bringing business to this area and retaining business in this area. So this $8,900 for the contribution fee to maintain our SMEGA relationship is I think, a good investment in our region. So,
Questions? Yes, Carla?
I'm really have reservations about this. As past mayor, working with SMEGA, it seems like they never did anything for us, and you and I have talked about it before. I'm probably going to vote yes for it, but I want the commissioners to think about this in another year. Did they really do us some good? I think regional's good. We need people coming in. We need jobs for our citizens here. But in the past, it just hasn't proved to help us.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Attorney.
Yeah, Bill, I sort of agree with Carla. I would like to see what they have done for this coming year, because that was in my notes to make tonight, is that it's okay for this year, but I want to see what they've done for us for next year. I don't know if we want to get into that field, so.
I'd like to make a motion.
Well, hang on, I'm going to let Bill offer one more thing, and then I have something to say too.
okay, again, I want to do, in the briefing, it does explain that this new relationship could be beneficial in the fact that the Four Flags Chamber had an asset of significant value. They own the high-rise in Niles, which has been, I believe as of today, closed on. So they sold that property for $2.5 million. That will add some financial stability to this new relationship with SMEGA. SMEGA has always suffered with some financial support issues, a smaller budget to try to get some things done, and I'm offering that, and I hear your comments, and they are on target. I really would like to see how they perform over the next year, and then next year come back and provide you with some evaluation of, is it worth it or not? So I think that's kind of where we're at.
And I just would like you all to know that the decision to merge with the Niles Chamber was not shared with anyone from Buchanan. So that was voted on, and we showed up at a meeting, and it was kind of sprung on us. And when I asked why no one was included in this decision, I didn't really receive much of an answer. So I was a little bit disappointed about that, but, you know. All right, did you want to go ahead and make the motion, Dan?
Well, I'd really like to kind of move that we postpone this decision till the next meeting, because I don't want to vote yes, and I hear some pretty serious dissent, you know, and actually, I'm proud of you, Carla, thank you very much, because I really wanted to step up on this one, because, you know, I've heard nothing but complaints about how we don't get any help, we get blindsided, we get told the day after the meeting. So I'm not really prepared to vote on this tonight. So I'd like to move that we cancel or stall this or put this off until the next meeting.
Okay, do I have a second?
Do we have a date of when we have to make this decision?
Well, they're, you know, we've been invoiced, so it's been, it's been a little bit of a while trying to figure out where they were going with it. And even SMEGA was in a little bit of a disarray because their conversations with the chamber all hinged on the fact that the property would be sold. So the property is sold and closed on today. So I think the organization together will be moving forward. So, but I don't see what.
Yes, Commissioner.
I'll second Dan's motion that we postpone this until the next meeting.
Okay, roll call, please.
And do all in favor?
Oh, all in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Sorry. Any opposed? Okay.
Motion
All right,
carries.
thank you very much. All right, and with that, we're on item C of new business, Resolution 2018-10/177, clarify division of Enterprise Street right-of-way. And I believe Norma is confused about this, so if you would like to explain that, we could.
And I'll leave that up to Deb. Deb's
Oh,
been
Deb's
working
here
on
to
this
do that,
project
okay.
for
Thank you, sorry, Deb.
quite a while, so.
Mayor and Commissioners, this actually started since I've been here when Mr. Roberson, who's one of the property owners who was here, wanted to put up a fence on his rear property line, and we discovered that there were a number of issues that prevented him from doing that. And so we've been working, and also the property owner to the north, Mr. Heminger, who's represented by his daughter Victoria, who is also here, to try and get the property, the property line defined, for a better way to say it. And we took a step to do that last year when we vacated the alley behind the undeveloped alley. So we thought we were finished, but then we discovered, or Mr. Roberson discovered, that when Enterprise Street was vacated, and the city vacated that in 2010, there wasn't any division of property, the property lines for the adjacent property owners would be on the east side, because Enterprise Street was actually built to the west of the platted right-of-way. So how that happened, I don't know, but it was, quote, in the wrong place. So when Enterprise Street was divided or vacated, there was no division. And so been working with both of the property owners so that they would agree, or could agree, on how that area, no man's land, if you will, should be divided. And so they have come to that agreement, and so I've put together the resolution, just basically saying that, very simple, that, you know, there is a vacated Enterprise Street, and when it was vacated, there was no division of property, and so this resolution resolves the division so that the north and south parcels, if you will, are created along the same line, which is described in both of the legal descriptions.
Okay, questions? All right, I need a motion.
I make the motion that we clarify the division of Enterprise Street right-of-way.
Okay, and a second.
I'll support.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cole? Yes. Commissioner Viancy?
Yes.
Commissioner Cherney?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Hess?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
very much.
All right, and with that, we're on item number 12, public comment. Citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to discuss any non-agenda item. No takers, huh? All right. And with that, this evening, we have a presentation by Mike Schwartz from Prina Newhoff, Stormwater Asset Management Plan and Program. So please welcome Mike. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Commissioners. Let's take just a moment. We'll see if it'll load up like it did this morning, probably on the technology today.
And for the public, if you do want to spin your chairs around, that is a much larger screen than the TV, so you might get a little more detail on what's going to be presented here.
Getting warm in here.
It's on my screen. It's not up on anybody else. Great.
There it goes.
There it goes. Okay.
Yeah,
He touched
there's-
it.
There's a little
Yeah,
lag.
you touched it. Thank you. It's the magic touch.
There's a little lag, so.
Magic. It's just technology. You press a button and it's all on all sorts of screens. So, thank you very much. As the memo says, I'm Mike Schwartz from Pride at Newhoff. Our office is at 7123 Stadium Drive in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Just a little bit quick history. I'm here to talk tonight a little bit of your asset management program. And asset management at its core is basically understanding what utilities or infrastructure or assets the municipality owns, what condition it is in. Step 3 is to figure out the risk of something happening to that asset. And then 4, the consequence of that. And 5th, what it would cost to maintain or rebuild that infrastructure, to maintain that in a proper working order. So today we're going to talk about basically the condition of your system. Back in 2013, the City of Buchanan applied for what was known as a SAW grant. That was a Stormwater Asset Management and Wastewater Grant. There was, at that time, more applicants than money available, and so the lottery was performed, and there was these magic balls drawn, and you were actually awarded it about 2.5 years after the grant application. So you received a grant just over 2.5 years ago on that. So it's coming near an end at the end of the year. But we've been working on your system and analyzing all those criteria for the last 2.5 years. You've seen crews use CCTV cameras, smoke testing your system, computer modeling, and all sorts of other things to actually figure out what condition and its capabilities are of the system of both stormwater and sanitary. You did get a grant for both assets. It did not cover water, your water main, but it covered only the sanitary and storm systems. So with that, I'm going to break this into 2 sections. I'm going to focus on your wastewater for the first half and then your stormwater. So if you could hit the first slide. The arrow. Just the right arrow.
Space bar.
Try the space bar.
Space bar.
There you go.
Success.
All right, first slide, the wastewater system. So, we hit another slide. All right, so what you have here, and it's probably a little hard to see, but you have a lot of color lines up on the screen there. That is your wastewater system. In essence, you have pipes underneath the roadway of every one of your streets. So all the residents within your city have sanitary sewer. It actually goes out into the township on the east side, and then it also goes down to the landfill. With this combination of gravity sewer mains and lift stations that once you reach a low point, they repump the sewage up, and it ultimately goes to the big kind of vacant spot up in the middle center right area. That's where your waste treatment plant is located, where it all gets treated. So this is just basically an inventory map of what you own. There's lots of information we put into a GIS system that covers diameters, materials, things of that nature. But this is basically a map to show you what your sanitary system looks like that you own. Next slide. So a little bit of statistics on your system. Your sanitary system was built in about 1932. So you have a very old, aging infrastructure. So that was basically started around the Clean Water Act, where basically you were not allowed to discharge storm or sanitary straight into lakes, rivers, and streams. You had to treat that. So you've basically built a wastewater treatment system to serve the downtown core system and your treatment plant. So what you see here is about 30%, or about, what did I go with that? About 50% of your system was built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So you have a relatively old system, greater than 70 years. Materials were very common. Pretty much was all clay pipe, and the very large diameters were concrete, very typical in that time. About the 1980s, they started switching over to plastics. And there's reasons that causes problems when there was clay and concrete in the past versus the modern materials they have now. So this is just kind of showing years and materials selected on your things. So the next slide. So now what we'll do is talk a little bit about pipe ratings of what we should be looking at. So we looked at all your pipes in a combination of zoom cameras and CCTV cameras. We try to use as much closed circuit television as possible to get the best evaluation of your system. So we rated all your pipes on a rating of 1 to 5. It's very similar to how you guys rate roads or a Paisley rating, but they do it on a scale of 1 to 10, although you could condense it to 1 on 5 for that whole reason. But basically, you get a rating of 1 to 5 on your pipes. And in this rating, a 1 is basically a nice, new, round, nice-looking pipe. And why don't you click that? Sorry. So there's the 5 ratings. So we have good, moderate, fail, poor, or moderate, fair, poor, and failed on a scale of 1 to 5. So and they generally go, for simplistic, we kept them blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. So when we get to see some maps, colors will pop a little better. So what does those numbers actually mean? So 1, like I described, is a nice, clean, round pipe, no defects speaking. A number 2 is moderate condition. There might be a little corrosion, some minor offset joints, some roots starting to occur, some debris, occasional cracking. Clay is very prone to cracking. Plastic is prone to deforming. So there's combinations. Concrete is prone, especially in sewer environments, to corrode and have corrosion and start losing concrete because sewer gases turn into hydrogen sulfide and sulfuric acid, and that eats concrete. So concrete has problems too. So there's not a perfect material out there, even today, but each has their pros and cons. Next slide. Number 3 gets a little bit worse, still functions, but you're starting to have major joint offsets, more cracking, things of that nature. Next one. 4 starts looking kind of bad. You start seeing corrosion, start seeing rebar. Potentially the roots are starting to invade your system. Pipes may just not be aligned, things of that nature. And then 5, it looks pretty bad. You got infiltration, you got things not even straight, the roots are everywhere, pipes have started collapsed or have collapsed, things of that nature. All these photos right now are not of your system. We'll show you pictures of your system yet. So these are just examples to show you when we talk about a scale of 1 to 5, what we're generally discussing on how extreme that is. And the stuff normally doesn't go from a 1 to 5 overnight. I mean, this stuff takes generally decades and decades. I mean, so it's not like you can do an evaluation and next week it'll be completely different, unless somebody hit it or something strange. But it's not a fast-moving process. Next slide. So these next couple are going to be a little bit hard to read, but bear with me. I do have a couple PowerPoint handouts if somebody wants to see those after the presentation for your staff. So this was a structural defect. So what this was looking at was every time the CCTV camera went down there and noticed something, whether it was a crack, infiltration, or something, they actually snapped that. It's actually get rated through what's called a PACP rated, and that's a national standard inventory of how pipes are supposed to be rated on a national scale, and they rate those defects also on a scale of 1 to 5. So the severity of that, the type of defect, and things of that nature. And so every time they found something, roots, infiltration, broken pipes, there's a little dot. So there's thousands of these through there. And some of them are structural, some of them are maintenance issues, some of them will just tell me that there's a lateral to a property going to things like that. This is actually highlighting only structural defects. So there are a couple lines that pop out pretty quickly, more along the center core of the city system. That was pretty much 1930s clay. So we expected to see a lot of that. It was not a shock to any of the DPW staff and the thing because they know they can't get their cleaning equipment through the pipes. They can't get their CCTV cameras generally through the pipes. So it took them a lot of work to get these evaluations done. But so they did get through that. So next slide. So we take all those structural defects and we then rate your pipes on a risk of failure. So that's where we get into what is the chances of it failing on a scale of 1 to 5. Generally thinking that same methodology. You have a good pipe all the way to a pipe that's already failing. So this is a map that takes all those structural defects based on those codes and such and assigns a value to the pipe as a risk of failure. So next slide.
Push. Yeah, no, there it is.
So taking that whole map and kind of summarizing this into a little pie chart, what does that mean? So the sewer, which is the main section of your gravity sewer, about 17% of your system falls into that 5 category, and 12% falls into that 4 category. So that's where we say about 30% of your system is in poor to failing condition. It still means that 70% is still good. It doesn't mean that it's poor or failed, still doesn't function. Obviously, sewage is still getting to your waste treatment plant, but you do get infiltration currently and such like that. But about 30% of your system is in that poor to fair or poor to failing condition of your sanitary system. Next slide. This is, when you ignore all the structural items and you focus on more of operations, defects, we'll call them more or less, and we look at basically debris and roots of what's happening to your system. And this is a map that highlights which pipes have roots in your system. And about 40% of your system contains roots, which is very common for clay pipe. It's kind of amazing that, yes, your sewer is down, 8 feet, 9 feet down below the middle of the road. How do tree roots get into there? I wish I knew. But tree roots get into them. They actually go up sewer laterals from the houses and right on through. Sewage is great nutrient base for trees, and those roots will find it, and it has water, nutrients, and they love it. So that's why the DPWs are always root cutting, cleaning, trying to maintain the system, is to keep these roots small enough that it doesn't do all the backups and blockages to your system. Next slide. This one's really harder to see. It looks better on a bigger map, and the staff has maps and nice, neat photos and such like that. But this is an infiltration map. So we did a ton of smoke testing. Really, we smoke test your entire sanitary system. And this showed where we found things that weren't supposed to be connected to the sanitary system. There was catch basins tied to the sanitary system, and downspouts, roof downspouts. There was actually all sorts of interesting things found with smoke testing, which we find in every single community, even new communities when we do that. It's amazing what you find that people have connected when they build houses and such. But basically what the CCTV camera found was generally following up the path of McCoy Creek right on up through to the waste treatment plant. That middle, kind of the southwest corner, moving on up in a kind of a northeast direction, they did find infiltration quite regularly down those pipes, which was also once not a big surprise because you have clay in that area, roots in that area, and if it's under water table, that water is going to be coming through those joints too. So there was not necessarily a big surprise on that either. And you could ask anybody at the waste treatment plant, they already know there's a tremendous amount of infiltration at the waste treatment plant based on here's how much water we bill at, here's how much we're treating. Those numbers are not close. And then when it rains, it goes up even substantially more. So the help of the smoke testing was to help determine that. And then we also modeled all that information to find out what your pipes could do and such like that and how it handles that. So with that said, you're kind of wondering, well, what does our system look like? So we'll just show some examples of your sanitary system. Sanitary sewers, once in a while you get a utility conflict. Not as much as storm, but you had 2 utilities that have been notified through your sanitary system. So the first one is very likely either a water service or a gas main that has actually hit the sanitary sewer. It's probably been there for decades, but I'm just, it's probably, I think it's a gas main. It's through your sewer. But I was actually kind of surprised for the number of systems I've seen and such. This is actually probably the fewest utility hits I have seen on a sanitary system. Because I have a system that I just did a presentation to this. Their system is a 20th of your size. Built in the 1980s, they had 7 of them. Directional drills nowadays go through storm, sanitary, and they don't even know they hit them. Storm's a little higher, so they get hit all the time. And nobody knows about that until you do a CCTV camera. So there is one location, or 2 actually locations with your sanitary system. Those are problems, especially if you send up a root cutter or something and it's a gas main. Those are typically bad days. So we will work on with the DPW to get that resolved on that. Some of the other ones is, like on the right, there is no wall section left to the pipe. It's actually, that's the bottom, so there's nothing there. So you have holes through a section of that pipe. I don't show you all the good pictures because those are kind of boring to show, so I kind of show you some of the nastier pictures. Although, there's a fine line on some of these streets when I see the same photo every 4 feet. I don't show you 26 photos of the same pipe. So next photo. Here's just a few more examples in your system. So that would be another hole through a clay pipe. What that is generally bad is obviously sewage can leak out of the system, and then also infiltration can come into the system. So those are not terribly bad. I mean, you think about it, it's bad, but it's probably been like that for years. Not a good thing, but it's probably been there, so it's not like tomorrow we got to go fix that exact same thing. It needs to plan to start resolving these issues, but and that's what we're working on right now. Plastic, I mentioned, can get deformed. You think, hey, we just built the sewer in the 1990s, it should be fine. There's an example of sometimes that you could have new sewer that it does not quite look right, and that is a plastic material. The other ones is starting to show corrosion on the lower site. Next photo. So this is some of your Oak Street, Redbud is kind of this. These are kind of these photos. So this is what infiltration looks like coming through the system. That is corrosion and scaling on the pipes through there. That pipe on the lower right, I think that took them almost, it seems like 3 weeks to get through that pipe and about 17 jetting opportunities and such. That one was very well sealed up and to even get sewage through that, so that was kind of interesting. And the lower right's a little tougher to see, but that dark spot inside is actually infiltration coming through the pipe. Next slide. So this is what roots look like in your system. When I showed that pipe with all these purples, we did have your pipes root cut. So, but the thing to remember is roots do come back. So it's like, yes, these roots right there aren't there right now, but they are expected to grow back. So that was the part of this, was to evaluate which pipes have roots, so that way the DPW, sewer, water departments can come up with a plan and a sequence of how frequently and which pipes need to be root cut to keep those out of the system to prevent backups. And the next photo. Besides the gravity sewers, you have 5 lift stations in your system that when it gets down to sewage goes to low points, you have to repump it up to another higher point and then keeps flowing down until you get the waste treatment plant. A couple of your lift stations started to look like this. So these should be nice, generally brand new looking, would be a 1. Once again, these would be falling into that scale of probably in a 4. They're still functioning, but the corrosion's completely gone. They're starting to rust completely through. When these things start failing, basically sewage will just start breaking those pipes because these things go under pressure. So that's normally when it becomes catastrophic. So there is a plan we're working on to retrofit or resolve some of your pipings and coatings and stuff like that in your lift stations. So that's kind of the part you can see. Then there's this whole wet well portion of that too. A couple more slides. There's a couple more of some lift stations, electrical panels rusting, corrosions of your guide rails that actually drop the pumps in to make those function. I did, on a side note, I did have a project a year ago. Those rails on another system failed. That was a bad day for that DPW because he had to go down, retrieve the pumps, and remount those rails for brand new ones down in flowing sewage. So he did not have a happy day. So I did not want his job that day. The picture on the top right is, so the electrical conduits come into that wet well there. There's actually water pouring through the electrical conduits and around the electrical conduit into the lift station. It's a little tougher to see on that, but that's what that's showing, is you actually just have water coming straight into a lift station. And then the next slide, we did mention that we smoke test your sanitary system. So an ideal system, when we smoke test that, the only thing you should see is white smoke coming out of the vent stack of connected houses. That should be the only thing you see. What you found was there was about 26 city storm catch basins tied directly to the sanitary system. There was 100 and some broken cleanouts that go to property lines. A lot of those can be graded down to low spots to keep their yards nice and dry sometimes. There was actually 2 parking lots completely that their center catch basin just smoked when we did their sanitary system, which means that entire parking lot, when it rains, all that water is going to that basin and going to your waste treatment plant. So The DPW has had this list since 2017. They have been working on that. What smoke testing will not tell you, though, is if people have sump pumps connected to the houses, which is against your ordinances to have sump pumps, which is true in almost, I think, every single municipality I can think of. But people put sump pumps directly to sanitary systems, but because it's all pressurized, you can't find that in smoke testing. So that's one downside of smoke testing. But these are just some examples of downspouts connected, parking lots connected, both private and public. They went both ways. You actually do have 2 streets that actually have combined storm and sanitary systems that date back into the 30s, that they have never been split apart. So all the catch basins and sanitary, all there is all in one pipe, and it goes to the sanitary system. So that's also will be identified in some projects. Next slide. So sorry about that's the bad news. So now we'll kind of talk a little bit what we do with some of this stuff. We get into criticality of the system. That's one of the big terms the DEQ likes to hear about, is how critical is your infrastructure and which ones to focus on first. And that's just a kind of a big word that takes into account the consequence of failure. So you have these pipes that have a risk of failing. Doesn't mean that they have failed completely or will fail tomorrow or something, but you take this risk and you look at the consequence, both cost, economic, environmental, and you score those and you multiply these together and you can come up with a criticality, which in this method comes in a score of 1 to 25. They get rated. And we kind of focus on, okay, so you have this big group of 30% that is in fair to, or poor to failing. Well, which ones would you focus on? You'd focus on the most critical infrastructure first. So that's where this map comes into play, is to help focus on prioritization of the system, and that takes into account consequence of failures in the system. And then, and these are all in a big evaluation report that will put most people to sleep. I know Bill and most of the staff has read it and looked at it, and they probably say, and what did that all say? So it works better to just talk to them over times. And we've had several hour meetings numerous times just to talk about what the findings are and such. We did computer modeling of the system. Even though you have a lot of infiltration and such on your system, there was actually only a few lines that are really seeing problematic issues for capacity. It was typically the areas of is it Day Street and Redbud North. There is actually the section that goes from literally we'll call it the downtown corner that goes across the creek to the treatment plant. That is actually marginal. It is depends on the day, the hour, the time. If you go out there, it looks like it's about 90% full. You go out some other times, it looks like about 30% full. So it has big swings in that area. And then there's 2 lift stations that have significant issues, and that for capacity. And that was actually the Schrimmer lift station and the one in the lower right. I'm just drew a complete blank. Mill Pond lift station. Actually see significant capacity issues when it rains in those 2 systems. And then the last slide, this is a draft of the recommended areas of focus in the report for the pipe improvements and to resolve those issues. Yes, it looks bad, but we were actually looking at this again today. It covers a lot of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s pipes. So it kind of covers your downtown core and moving up into the northern section, Redbud and Front Street is kind of the focus area. And that will actually be a recurring theme for all your infrastructure, whether it's water, whether it's storm, or whether it's sanitary system. Next slide. So stormwater system. This will be a little, I'm sorry, yes.
Could I ask a question about the infiltration? So is there a way that you're able to map the worst of the infiltration associated with either certain particular trees or, I mean?
Yeah, yes.
And then the remedies of that, more than maintenance, is something that you're advocating, that removal of trees or any of that kind of stuff? How political do you want to get with this town?
Well, I normally don't advocate for removing trees. That becomes that's a political decision, but I will not suggest removing all the trees in the right of way because I'm not sure that will fix anything.
Just checking.
So I will not advocate to remove trees just to remove a tree root in your sanitary sewer system. So I will say that. As for priorities or rankings of the systems, the infiltration does get ranked in different categories. So there's what's called a gusher, a runner, a weeper, a stain, and forget the other one. But there is 5 categories of that, each of them getting more and more severe. When I looked at your system, I typically look at when I see the 4s and 5s, we'll call them the flat-out runners and gushers of the systems. I did not see what I've seen in many other communities, even on some newer stuff, that sometimes when I see a gusher, it looks like a flat-out waterfall coming in, and it's normally just a misaligned joint or a bad repair or something. Under several feet of water table. You do have some, we'll call them gushers, that may be, quarter size lines that just are solid stream. That's enough to classify as a gusher. So you do have some of those in the system, but you think, well, it's only a quarter running 24/7, 365. That does add up after a while. And really where that comes into is the cost of treatment of that. Is that going to cause a structural problem? Probably not. But if you let it go, can cause backups. If roots start getting in front of that water's going to keep going there, and it will have potential to back that up. The same thing happens with roots. There's lots of different classifications of roots. There's fine roots, medium, root balls, tap roots, and those are all identified also with the CCTV. Some of them we can address if they're coming up a lateral, because they can root cut the mainline pipe. If they're coming up a lateral, you would actually have to do it from the house to clear that line there. But the main lines are all generally ranked in basically a scale of 1 to 3 on there. But like I said, they are expected to grow back. So even if it may be fine roots today, a year and a half from now, it may be a medium-sized root or tap root or something of that nature too.
And how often does that maintenance need to be taken place?
Well, most of the communities I deal with, it becomes trial and error a little bit, but most of them I see is a 3 to 4 year cycle for maintaining the roots cuttings. I do know a couple communities that they're on a 4-year cycle of cutting their roots, but they have a couple streets that they do every year or every other year. It's just that bad that it just keeps growing. So they just, every time they hire a contractor on their 4-year cycle, one of them they're doing that same run every single year regardless. So it varies a little bit, and it probably depends a little bit on the tree type. And I'm not a tree expert. I won't say I know anything about trees, but it could be the proximity of the tree, the type of tree, I don't know. But I'm still not going to advocate for removing all the trees on that.
All right, thank you.
Yep, so stormwater. Next slide. All right. Stormwater, not quite as intense, but you still have quite a bit of stormwater. It does drain pretty much all your streets, but it obviously isn't trying to get all to one connection point. You do have basically McCoy Creek running all the way through your city and the St. Joe River. So you have about 90-ish discharges to McCoy Creek and 5 directly to St. Joe River. So all your pipes, when it does rain, this is a trivia question later, when it rains, the water goes to the lakes, rivers, and streams of your system. So it does not go to a waste treatment plant, or it should not be going to a waste treatment plant. It should be going to lakes, rivers, and streams. So basically you have about 104,000 feet of storm pipe. This is also pretty old stuff, so not as much, but you did have it built about the same time, the 20s, 30s, 40s. But you had a big increase in the 50s and 60s after World War II. And that's probably when you had a large booming expansion of the city, is probably why that substantially increased about that period of time. And it was very common for you guys to have reinforced concrete or reinforced concrete or some form of concrete pipe, and also clay back then too. So, so the next slide. The risk of failure. This is once again the same type of map, a risk of failure map that ranks all your pipes on a 1 to 5. It actually looks a lot better than your sanitary system. A lot of it may be just because of the 50s, 60s. You don't have the corrosive environment of like sanitary. It's rainwater, so it doesn't need necessarily concrete pipe as much and that type of nature. So the next slide, about 12% of your system fell into that category of failed or poor conditions of your storm pipe. So that's a fairly big improvement on that, but it was kind of likely expected to see based on the age of the system and the use of the system. And a lot of those issues you will see is actually caused from utility conflicts, other getting hit. Storm is put a lot shallower, so it's just prone to get hit, crushed, and especially when it's not embedded properly and such. So we do see more of that type stuff with storm in there. Next slide. So this is some of your pipes on your storm. Very similar again, gas mains running through. Storm pipes, some of them long way, some of them short way, some of them diagonally. Plastic pipes running through them, sewer laterals running through them, water services running through them. I think you had in the storm 19 of them in your storm that had a utility hit, and 3 manholes that actually have utilities running through them, which is kind of surprising sometimes. I thought that was really strange until I see that in every single community. I would have thought you would know you hit a concrete 4-foot manhole structure, but apparently directional drill doesn't know it hits that either. They go through just about everything. And sometimes they put them there in purpose, which, oh, we hit something, so let's build something around it and just kind of patch it up and nobody will know. We find some of that sometimes too. So you did have a lot more utility hits, but that was very common in storm. The next one is kind of showing what some of your storm does look like of your 12%, we'll say. The clay pipe generally gets crushed more, we'll say, because it is shallower. So there is some definite, we've lost a lot of structural integrity of several of your clay pipes. Concrete, when you see rebar, you've gone through at least half the concrete, so you've lost most of the structural support of concrete. So that's an example of some of your storm sewers in that section. And then a few more on the next slide. So this is kind of, the bottom right is a hole in your pipe. I'm not even quite sure what I'm looking at, but I shouldn't be looking at anything through there. And then just what cracking and things like that is. That's not as necessarily as bad because you're not letting sewage out of the ground, and sometimes when infiltration comes into it, it's not necessarily the end of the world either because it's all probably going to McCoy Creek anyways. So it can cause problems in capacity too. But obviously, the more stuff that blocks it, the less capacity you have, and the more, that's where people start complaining because you have flooding on your streets and ponding, and it seems to stick around for 3 or 4 days or 2 hours. Nobody likes it even sticking around for 20 minutes. So they like to have nice, clean roads to drive on. Next slide. So once again, there was a criticality map done. Basically, it highlighted, once again, the downtown area, Front Street and Redbud Trail were pretty much the high critical areas. But if you kind of think about your city, those are pretty much high traffic, high population, all your flows of everything's going through there. You're a big bowl, we'll say generally around here. So once again, that was a high criticality area. The next slide, are we on the computer modeling? What's kind of interesting in storm is you take storm that was designed in 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. They weren't designed at the same level of service that we do nowadays. You know, we're trying to treat certain storms or handle certain storm events. They didn't do that back then, and the storms have changed as time has moved on, become more intense, more frequent. So a lot of times when I look at small or older storm pipes, almost nothing meets that criteria because it was very common for them to put a little 6-inch pipe in or an 8-inch pipe just to get water off the road draining somewhere. Nowadays, people don't put anything smaller than 12-inch pipe in the ground, and it just kind of goes up from there. But generally speaking, there was lots of evaluations done on different storm events from a 1-year, 2-year, 5-year, 10, and on. And basically what was showed was, generally speaking, Redbud and Front Street had major capacity issues, which was actually no surprise to the DPW because they've actually got some parallel lines, they flipped some lines, they've tried tying lines together, they've got some really screwed up pipes trying to just get water to go from point A to point B. And then actually the Victory Street corridor up in the east corridor actually experienced a lot of issues with road flooded in the computer models when this events occurred. And then the next slide.
Ain't moving for you, Bill. No.
There we go. This is kind of the recommended improvement areas. The primary ones for this was a combination of structural, but a lot of it was in capacity when we're looking at Redbud in front, and those are the big yellow highlights out there. And then once again, the Victory Street area corridor up there. And then there's just some scattered little red dots all over the place. Most of those are your utility hits that have been hit across the storm system, is why there's these little tiny spots all over your map.
What size pipes are them? The yellow ones? that you
The
got
yellow
there?
ones, I think most of those are generally 15-inch pipes, 12
So
and
can
15.
you run smaller pipe down them since there's storms, or not?
We need to get bigger pipes.
Okay.
They're too small right now.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that was proposed in your, I've read all these reports, I'm reading a lot of reports. I want to say those were supposed to be 24 to 30-inch pipes
Oh, okay.
to make that capacity work properly.
Thank you.
And then, what do we do with all this data? So basically what we do is kind of some of the last steps, is trying to figure out when to fix these projects, what the correct fix is on each of these projects, and ultimately, what does this cost to do these projects? So we take all this data and we actually put this in a very complex spreadsheet software program from all the GIS data, and it spits out an anticipated year, and then you override it with what year you're actually going to do it, but it also gives us projected costs for this project. And that's actually where we're going through with staff right now, is evaluating what the appropriate fix is, what that might be, and when that may actually occur, and how would you actually finance something like that, and what sequence to do those in, so it makes sense. So the last thing we want to do is fix one utility, pave the road, and then forget we didn't do the water main or the storm, and you got to rip it all up again. And so basically what we're looking at is, we'll call them utility corridors. So that way, if we were ripping up a section for a lead service or a new water main or something, we're going to handle the road, the storm, the sanitary, gas, electric, everybody else who might be in there, to make sure that we don't have to go after a road again and get it done once and done it correctly. So with that, that brings me to the end of this presentation today.
Could you possibly send that to us as a link? Because I would like to look at some of those maps in more detail.
Yep, and there is several sets of maps from the full reports, from the smoke testing reports, the evaluation reports, and with a lot more photos
Okay.
and such in those reports too.
Okay, Commissioner Attorney?
Yeah, I'd like to see the last page of that, no, through the link you can send to me. It's curious because we had visited the city of Matson, the Bill, me, and the mayor, because they were going through the same project. I'll have to look. I took pictures of what it's actually costing them, because they're a city of 80,000. Remember, we went out there, because I know the mayor there, okay? And they were in the process of doing that kind of work and what the cost would be. So I'm going to look and see if I can find those pictures that I took.
I would caution comparing your system
Oh,
to
no,
any other
excellent.
system, because
It's the
everybody is
population.
different.
It's the population.
But even
there.
population though,
Yeah.
it's, and even financial advisors will really caution that every community is different, different quantity, different years, different environments, even neighbors.
Sure.
So you will get cautioned on that, just to say, hey, their rates are this, or this is this. So just
Sure.
forewarning,
Okay.
precursor.
Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, great. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We appreciate all the hard work you've
Yes.
done.
Great report.
Thank you very much.
It's a time-consuming process.
Oh, it's, yes.
thank
Very
you.
educational sometimes.
Yes, I
too.
know.
Really even to staff
Yes.
and the public more than,
Yes, yes.
maybe not sometimes the staff sometimes, especially the DPWs and such, but
Yeah.
it gives them nice background data to support their hunches, their gut feelings, their stuff, so.
Right, what?
Can I make a comment?
Yes, go right ahead.
Just to let you know, see, I work for a gas utility in the city of Chicago, so a lot of people don't understand is what you don't see, you don't know until you go there, until you open up the street. You know, you got a lot of mains down there.
Yep.
So I was very curious of what you took there, and that is true.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. All right, and with that, we're on commissioner comments. This evening, we'll start with Commissioner Viganski.
Oh, no, it was a fantastic presentation. What do you keep it at, about 35 minutes? It was pretty close to that. It was very, I mean, well, I know, I understand, but that's some very boring stuff, and you moved it right along. Thank you very
great.
much. That's the only thing I got to say.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Turdy?
The only thing I got to say is just to remind the public, tomorrow night, we're having a big meeting with the Planning Commission. We're going over our 10-year master plan. I would hope to see a lot of individuals, citizens come here. We're looking for input. So it's your opportunity also to maybe make a comment or two. So it's a big meeting. So tomorrow night, Deborah, at 7 o'clock, isn't that correct? Okay, that's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, Commissioner Moore?
I just want to remind everyone, Saturday is Make a Difference Day, so if you're available to help volunteer, I think you need to register at the Methodist Church on Oak Street between 8 and 8:30. I guess there will be coffee there. You register, sign up, and get assigned to a work session somewhere in town. So show up and volunteer and see how much we can do with just a few tools and a lot of willing workers. So we'll see you there on Saturday.
And it's a good way to meet people, just so you know. I'm sorry, I'm just going to add to that. Okay.
What are you, a dating site or something? I don't know.
No, if you're new to the community, it's a good way to meet other fun-loving people. All right, Commissioner Cole?
Yeah, I just want to say that on October 22nd, that will be my last commission meeting here for the city of Buchanan. My husband and I are retiring to a new home in another state. I would like to thank the citizens for their support over the years. This will always be my hometown. Many thanks to all the city employees for a great job well done. Bill, you have brought the city forward and you have made life better here in Buchanan, and we thank you for that. Good luck to all the people who are running for the commission. I hope you come in with an open mind and some common sense to come along with that. Bill has a great open door policy. Please use that to your advantage in being well informed before you come to your meetings. Keep your packets before you when you come to your meeting. Keep your packets that you get each Friday. On Monday of your meeting, keep it in front of you so you can refer to your information and keep up with what's going on at the meeting. Ray and I hope to be moved before or right after Thanksgiving, so I'm wishing everyone happy holidays at this time. I also want to say thank you to Mayor Hess. She has done a great job during the time that she has been mayor, and with all the things that have happened while she was mayor. She went through a lot. Really unfair for her being a brand new mayor and then have so many things going on at that point in time. I wish you the best wishes for your new journey that you're going to go through. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. That was really nice. And with that, we would like to thank Carla for all her years of service, and I believe we're going to have a little thing at the next meeting. So thank you for all you've done and for all the help you've given me and when I took my new role on as mayor. And with that, my comments are just going to expand a little bit on Commissioner Moore's comment about Make a Difference Day. please come and help the mayor separate books at the Ross Sanders house. I have about, I don't know, probably upwards about 15,000 books. And they are still in boxes and they need to be sorted and they need to get into the children's hands. It's kind of a slow process. And if you're really nice to me, I'll bring donuts. So I'll see you at Make a Difference Day. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
All right, second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, for coming.